The lake shimmered through the wide glass windows as laughter rolled across my living room. At 70, I thought I had earned this celebration selling my consulting firm for $35 million felt like a crown placed gently on my head. My house. Polished oak floors and floral centerpieces. Smelled faintly of roses from Gideon's old garden. Colleagues toasted. Neighbors clapped my shoulders. And my family hovered like satellites, pretending warmth. In the swirl of chatter, I noticed Adriana, my only daughter. Her lipstick was too precise. Her smile stretched thin as if it might crack. I had seen that look in boardrooms, the face of someone who thinks the deal is already theirs. My gaze followed the twitch of her hand as she reached into her clutch, fingers curling around a small vial. The clear liquid slid into my chipped champagne flute, the one I had used for decades. No one else noticed, but I did. I allowed her to bring me the glass. Her voice syrupy. "Mother, you deserve the finest toast tonight." I smiled, took it gracefully, and raised it halfway. The room cheered. Cameras flashed. Then I tilted the flute toward her. "Let's toast together. Darling, share mine." For the briefest moment, her mask cracked, a flash of panic, quickly hidden by a laugh. "Oh, I promised myself only one glass tonight," she said, slipping the tray back into the waiter's hands. That refusal told me more than any confession could. I held the poisoned flute for several minutes, nodding at speeches, before drifting toward Carmen Vale, Adriana's mother-in-law, who stood absent-mindedly without a drink. I set the glass near her handbag, and, as expected, she picked it up with a distracted smile. 5 minutes later, Carmen crumpled onto the marble floor, foam catching at her lips. Guests screamed, chairs scraped. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Amid the chaos, I stood steady, pulse cold and even, watching Adriana's performance of horror, her hands clutching her pearls as if she hadn't already signed her part in this play. And as sirens neared, I knew the night had only just begun. The marble beneath Carmen's body was slick with spilled champagne, her convulsions jerking against the polished floor while guests scattered in shrieking confusion. Someone called 911, and within minutes, the ambulance lights painted the lake house walls red. Adriana wailed at the paramedics, clutching her pearls as though grief had descended upon her in an instant. I watched her clutch and sob. The performance, almost convincing, almost. Dorian Vale stood a few steps back, his face the color of milk. He could not meet my eyes. His hands fidgeted with his cufflinks, and the tremor running through them told me everything his lips refused to confess. The gurney rattled through my doorway. Carmen's breaths were shallow, foam trailing from the corner of her mouth. I followed them outside, refusing to let Adriana's theatrics distract me. I climbed into my car and trailed the ambulance through the night. The siren pierced the silence, and I found myself whispering to Gideon, "Long gone." Steady voice in my memory, "Never be naive in business. Never in blood." At the ER, fluorescent light bathed everything in sterile coldness. Doctors murmured near the curtain that shielded Carmen's body. The words carried clear enough possible oleander poisoning. My chest tightened. Oleander was no stranger. It grew in the manicured garden Adriana insisted on planting the year she moved into her estate. Decorative, poisonous, convenient. When they wheeled Carmen deeper into critical care, Adriana appeared at my side. Mascara streaked just enough to look tragic. She clutched my arm as though we were united. "If anything happens to my mother," her voice cracked like rehearsed theater. I placed my free hand over hers, steady as stone. Then perhaps the glass was meant for someone else. The color drained from her cheeks. For a moment, her mask slipped, and the truth glared through her silence before she pasted the smile back on. I let the moment stretch. memorizing her fear, because I had no intention of confronting her here. Not yet. The stage was still being set, and she was writing her own downfall with every word she spoke. The morning after the hospital, I sat in my mahogany study with a pot of black coffee cooling beside me. The room smelled of cedar and old ink, grounding me as I spread checkbooks and bank statements across the desk. Page after page told a story I had refused to read for too long. In the last decade, I had poured nearly $300,000 into Adriana and Dorian's lives. A mortgage payment when they were about to lose the house. A tuition check for Valeria's private academy, because Adriana insisted public schools were beneath her daughter. Tens of thousands more into Adriana's so-called boutique, a vanity project that devoured money and produced nothing but glossy shopping bags and Instagram photos. And for what Dorian's architecture firm remained one job away from collapse. And Adriana still carried herself as if she were heiress to an empire she never built. By contrast, Lucien, my son, who worked with calloused hands as a carpenter, rarely asked for more than a Sunday meal and the occasional loan for new tools. He lived in a modest bungalow across town, building furniture that lasted longer than most marriages. The imbalance stung me. My generosity had been reserved for the child who treated it as entitlement, while the one who respected me had gone without. I remembered Adriana's mocking laugh one evening years ago. "Mother, you're old. What will you do with all that money? Let us handle it." I had brushed it off then, but now the words gnawed at me. She had always seen my savings as hers, just waiting for my signature to unlock them. My phone buzzed. Adriana's message appeared a cheerful suggestion that I tour Sage Pines residence, a luxury senior community. She wrote of safety and peace of mind after Carmen's accident, and promised to bring brochures by that afternoon. The mask of concern reeked of coercion. I reached for the phone again, this time dialing Alejandro Crane. My lawyer's voice carried the steadiness I needed. We arranged an urgent meeting, because this time, I intended to arrive prepared. Alejandro's office smelled of polished oak and quiet authority. From the top floor, the Chicago skyline stretched beyond the glass. But I kept my eyes on the man behind the desk. His brass lamp cast a steady glow as I recounted every detail. The chipped flute, Adriana's refusal to drink, Carmen's collapse. I spoke without drama, but Alejandro understood the weight of each word. When I finished, he leaned back, fingertips pressed together. Without hard evidence, it remains your word against hers. Poison dissipates quickly, and theatrics can mask intent. We must prepare in ways no vial can reach. He opened a leather folder and began outlining protections. First, a neuropsych evaluation. Your competency must be beyond dispute, he said. If they try to paint you as confused, we will have certified proof of the opposite. Second, a complete revision of my will and the establishment of a living trust. Medical directives. 2. If anyone attempts to declare you incompetent, your estate immediately transfers not to your heirs, but to cancer research foundations. The very threat will deter them. I felt a cold satisfaction at that. Adriana dreamed of riches, but she might inherit only locked gates and laboratory microscopes. Alejandro continued, practical as ever. He recommended a full upgrade of my estate's security surveillance cameras at every entrance, motion sensors across the grounds, a panic alarm routed directly to the sheriff's office. Poison is a tool of secrecy, he said quietly. But you, Sylvette, must live in light. Then his eyes met mine, sharper than glass. Adriana's not careless. She's building a legal noose power of attorney. Guardianship papers, all neat and binding if you sign too quickly. Poison in ink can be as final as poison in a glass. I tightened my grip on the pen he had placed before me. I would not sign away my life to anyone. Gideon once told me contracts build empires or bury them. Today, mine would build walls stronger than steel. I bent over the papers, my hand steady, and began fortifying my future with signatures sharper than knives. Carmen arrived on my doorstep like a ghost in a sun hat, pale and small against the late afternoon light. She moved carefully, as if every step might unbalance the fragile rhythm of recovery. When she sank into my parlor chair, she folded her hands the way someone practices prayer. The sight of her ashamed, shook the last veneer of civility from the night. "I remember the taste," she said before I could ask. Her voice trembled, metallic, sharp, like pennies. I thought it was something I ate wrong. Then I saw Adriana by the table with a little bottle. I thought her fingers found the hem of her sleeve and twisted it. I thought she was helping. But she had that look. When she met my eyes, I unlatched the small, stubborn truth that had been sitting under my ribs. It was not for her, I said quietly. It was meant for me. I switched the glasses. The words landed between us in a heavy, terrible silence. Carmen put her hand to her mouth and made a small sound that might have been a sob or a curse. She had always seemed to me like a woman who tolerated too much adoring her daughter, smoothing out after her scandals, laughing off reckless purchases like they were ornaments on an otherwise fine life. Now the ornament had nearly killed her. "I should have known," Carmen whispered. "She's been different. She bought those expensive perfumes, the jewelry. She was always complaining about money. I thought it was vanity." Her eyes flooded. "She took out a policy on you. $1 million 6 months ago. Naming herself beneficiary." The world tilted. A policy was a quiet, legal kind of theft paperwork signed, while affection acted as witness. The thought of my blood being bound to another's pocket made my skin crawl. Carmen's confession welded itself to my resolve. Here was the woman who had been nearly stripped of breath by the very child she had raised. Here was a witness who had seen hands move and lips form the lie. "If she can poison me," Carmen said, voice flat with something like fear. "She can poison anyone." "No," I replied, feeling that old, unbending core reassert itself. "She will not hold that power over anyone else. Tomorrow, I would set the bait." I let Adriana believe the hook was in my mouth. When she suggested we set aside time to finalize my move to Sage Pines, I smiled, feigned relief, and agreed to a signing meeting at my home. She practically glowed, convinced she had already won. Behind her back, Alejandro drew up documents that looked like power of attorney forms, but controlled nothing more than a checking account with exactly $1 inside. A trap, wrapped in paper, waiting for her eager signature. At the same time, Gabriella Knox, my investigator with the kind of steel eyes that missed nothing, sent me her findings. Adriana and Dorian's life was a house of cards. Their home was triple mortgaged. Their credit cards bled out $200,000 in debt, and Dorian's firm teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. The image of success they paraded at every dinner was no more than a costume sewn from loans and lies. The most chilling discovery lay deeper in the report: regular payments. Neatly noted, to Dr. Elias Rowe. The name sent a shiver through me. A geriatric psychiatrist with a reputation whispered in legal circles pliable, willing to label the elderly incompetent for the right fee. So that was their safety net. If poison failed, they would shackle me in court, stripping my independence under the guise of medical concern. The pieces aligned too neatly to be coincidence. Adriana and Dorian were plotting a double attack. First the glass, then the gavel. Either way, my voice would be silenced, my fortune signed away. That night, I stood before my mirror, brushing back the silver strands of my hair. The reflection staring back at me was not frail, not fading. It was sharpened by betrayal, tempered by years of surviving boardrooms more ruthless than any family scheme. "They want me locked away," I murmured to the woman in the glass. My lips curved into a smile as cold as the lake in winter. "Tomorrow, I'll lock them out." And with that, I folded Gabriella's report into my leather folio, setting it beside Alejandro's decoy papers. Ready for the performance to come, they arrived as though they were walking into a corporate takeover. Not my home, Adriana in a fitted blazer, pearls gleaming at her throat, and Dorian with his briefcase tucked under his arm like a shield. They greeted me with the kind of practiced affection that never reached their eyes, pressing my hands, calling me mother in voices slick with rehearsed concern. "Just a few signatures," Adriana said brightly, sliding the forms across my dining table. "This will make everything easier, safer for you." I let my fingers tremble around the pen, as though age had finally won its battle with me. Twice I fumbled the cap, let it roll across the wood. Adriana leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping a rhythm of impatience. Dorian offered a sympathetic smile that didn't disguise the hunger in his eyes. At last, I scrawled my name on Alejandro's decoy documents. Adriana's breath caught, and she leaned toward Dorian, whispering just loud enough for me to catch the words. "Liquidating investments won't take long now." Before their illusion could bloom further, a sharp knock broke through the room. I rose slowly, steadier than they expected, and opened the door to Detectives Anya Guzman and Harold Pike. Their badges glinted in the doorway light. "We need a word," Guzman said, stepping inside. Her tone carried no courtesy. "Toxicology confirms Carmen Vale ingested concentrated oleander. The same substance was found in the champagne bottle from your party." Adriana's hand flew to her chest, a sob cracking out of her throat. Dorian stammered. "This must be a mistake. We had no idea." But Guzman wasn't finished. "We also recovered a life insurance policy naming Adriana Vale as beneficiary. And Dr. Rowe's correspondence regarding Mrs. Harrow's supposed cognitive decline." She placed the folder on the table, the weight of it heavier than any gavel. Adriana's hysteria broke into gasps, her pearls rattling against each breath. Dorian shook his head, insisting on ignorance, but his voice was thin, brittle. I stood still, calm as winter ice, while Detective Pike read Adriana her rights. And I knew the performance was only just beginning. When the detectives led Adriana out, her shrieks echoing against the hallway walls, Dorian lingered in my dining room, his shoulders slumped, his briefcase abandoned by the chair as if its weight had finally broken him. He rubbed his face with trembling hands before speaking. "I swear, Sylvette, I didn't know about the poison. I thought she was pushing for the residence, for papers. But never that." His eyes pleaded for mercy, but his voice carried the rasp of a man cornered. I slid Gabriella's report across the table. "Then explain this. 3 mortgages on your home, 200,000 in credit debt, invoices to Dr. Elias Rowe for evaluations." I tapped the pages with one finger. This wasn't ignorance. "Dorian, it was engineering." He sagged into the chair. "She told me it was temporary, that if we could just get access to your accounts, we could clear it all. She said once we had the money, everything would be different." I wanted to believe her. God help me. I did. He looked down at his hands, knuckles whitening. But I didn't stop her. That makes me guilty. I let the silence settle before delivering my own twist. "The power of attorney you gloated over," I leaned closer. "It controls a single dollar. That's all." His mouth opened, closed, then hung slack, color draining from his face. I continued, each word precise. Adriana inherits nothing. And you, Dorian, will never touch my estate. The only provision is for Valeria a modest trust that she alone will receive, provided you stay away from it. If you interfere, she loses it too." His composure cracked. He bent forward, sobs spilling into his palms, the sound of a man recognizing the ruins he had helped build. I watched him fold in on himself. No satisfaction in my chest, only the weight of truth settling like stone. For all his silence, he had been as dangerous as the hand holding the vial, and the consequences of that silence were only just beginning to unfold. 3 months blurred by in hearings, testimonies, and the slow grind of justice. When the gavel finally fell, Adriana was sentenced to 20 years for attempted murder. Dorian, his part smaller but undeniable, received 3 for conspiracy. The silence that followed in my home was not grief, but the hush of storm clouds finally dispersing. It was Valeria who pierced that silence. 16, her voice trembling over the phone. She asked the question that broke my heart and mended it in the same breath. "Grandmother, may I live with you?" She was horrified by her parents' choices, yet steady in her resolve to step away from their shadow. I told her yes, and in that word, I felt hope take root again. Carmen became my companion in ways neither of us expected. Every Thursday, we shared tea in my parlor. 2 women who had survived the same betrayal from different angles. We no longer spoke of Adriana with anger, but with a weary acceptance, as if bitterness would only tether us to her longer than necessary. Out of those conversations, the Harrow Elder Justice Fund was born. I channeled millions into it, ensuring that others facing manipulation and financial exploitation would have a shield. If Adriana taught me anything, it was that greed preyed on silence. I would not be silent again. In the evenings, I returned to Gideon's rose garden. The blooms were heavy, velvet red and fragrant, their thorns sharp against my gloves. They reminded me that beauty and danger grow from the same stem, and that survival is never without scars. I trimmed, watered, and whispered to them as though tending both the past and the future. And in the hush of twilight, I knew the final act still awaited me. In my study, the evening light fell across the glass case on the far shelf. Inside, it rested the chipped champagne flute, the very one Adriana had chosen for me. I encased it not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Sometimes survival is measured in seconds, the length of time it takes to switch one glass for another. I often think back to those first moments when suspicion became certainty. My hands had trembled so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady them. That night, after the party, I stood before Gideon's portrait and whispered into the silence, asking him if I had raised a monster, or if betrayal had bloomed all on its own. The answer never came, but the act of speaking steadied me. Steel had to follow softness, or I would not have endured. Alejandro visited this afternoon, his briefcase brimming with updates. He spoke evenly, but there was a satisfaction beneath his words. Creditors had repossessed Adriana and Dorian's grand house, the one with its cavernous ceilings and staged perfection. The proceeds, by some symmetry of fate, had gone toward Carmen's medical expenses. Justice had arrived without my hand lifting a blade, only by letting debts and lies collapse under their own weight. Later, Valeria burst into the room, her cheeks flushed, an envelope in her hands. She laid it on my desk with the reverence of a sacred offering. Columbia law had accepted her. "I'll fight for people like you, grandmother," she said, her eyes shining with resolve. I smiled then, the kind that begins deep in the bones. The torch had passed, not through inheritance, but through purpose. They counted my years but miscounted my wits. One switched glass gave me my life and my legacy.